You've probably drank his wine at a restaurant before, or you've probably eaten at a restaurant that he owned. I have here with me today Prince Moeng, as he says I should pronounce it. Prince, it's so good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored for the invite and can't wait for the conversation we're going to be having today.
I'm excited too, and it's because I know you are such a person who is well informed and well experienced in the business and entrepreneurship space. And I've seen that you've also ventured into the financial and investment space too. So this is basically what I wanted us to talk about, but really just tap into your brain. You know how people are always like, can I tap into your mind?
Yeah.
This is what we're doing today. And tell me, how did you get into this entrepreneurship? Well, firstly, introduce yourself. Let's start there.
Okay. My name is Prince Moeng. Born in the Northwest. Married to a wonderful woman. But I'm born into a family of pastors. My parents are entrepreneurs, right? So I got into entrepreneurship either through seeing my grandmother, who ran a spaza shop, very successful in her region, and then my mother, who initially worked in government and then left government to run her own consultancy. And through her consultancy, she assisted small businesses set up and grow. So that was my introduction. Through high school, I worked for her. I've seen her set up businesses like colleges. So holidays for me were one way of me earning income. And in high school, then I started a sweet company, sold sweets in my school, so successful that they had to close it down because we were taking the school tax up out of business.
Wow.
And then we fast forward that, we went to university, and that's when I started my first, I guess, big enterprise, which is Moeng Winery. And then through that, we built about 4 varieties of wine.
Mm-hmm.
And we had distribution across the country. And I realized in that whole journey at some point to say, I need to grow the enterprise close enough to what winemakers make.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I then thought about opening up a restaurant, because it allowed me the opportunity to self-distribute, but literally enjoy profit margins just above just the liquid, right? So you can attract a lot more clientele when you have a restaurant than just selling alcohol or just selling wine. You can have a family come in, have lunch, and then the mother, the father have the wine, and then the kids have drinks. So you're able to then tap into a broader market segment, essentially. So build the wine, build the restaurant. Unfortunately, COVID then came in. And by virtue of that, a lot of those 2 businesses were heavily impacted because you had restrictions, you couldn't trade. And the element for me then became where to from here, primarily because I think those 2 enterprises were my stepping stone into what do I do next.
Hi, I'm Yvette Ratshikhopha, Master Neuro-Linguistics Programming Coach, Leadership Coach, Life Coach, and Business Coach. I've been doing this for almost a decade, helping people heal, create the lives that they want, and become the leaders that they want to become in their business or in the workspace. If you want to book my services as a facilitator for your business, for your corporate environment, or even for a personal coaching workshop, then you can contact me on the same details. My website is www.yvettealu.co.za. Looking forward to hearing from you. I want to interrupt you right there. What did you learn from those businesses? Because you've spoken about the sweet business, right? And then you bravely step into starting your own wine brand. I mean, the audacity. Especially as a person of color or a Black man in South Africa. What made you think that is possible for you? Is it because you grew up in an environment where you saw people achieving certain things in the entrepreneurship space? Or is it just your own self-confidence or visionary sense of, confidence that allowed you to do that?
I would say I think my parents, particularly my mother, encouraged me, and encouraged in a sense of you could. So from sporting, My mother would be like, you learn how to play basketball when people are playing soccer, to a point where I got to provincial level, close enough to national, at least at the time. And she would then encourage me to then say, why don't you do this? So the wine conversation, or at least what sparked the conversation for me, was seeing a generation of entrepreneurs having built their businesses in front of me, and then being like, what enterprise do I want to create that is my identity outside of who my parents are, right? And wine, at least what sparked the idea of you could, is probably seeing Soweto Gold.
Okay.
I think for the first time in South Africa, for me, seeing a brand being birthed out of South Africa, owned by a South African. And that created a conversation of possibilities beyond bounds. And then you just then look at statistics. And that for me was, we as Black people are some of the biggest consumers of these products, but we don't have ownership.
We don't have ownership.
Right? And having started Sweet Company, the one thing that teaches you fundamentally is you need a market. So how do you tap into access to market? So you don't just wake up and say, I'm going to sell pin pops. You need somebody that says, oh, I actually want the pin pop, right? So when I then set up the wine business, it was realizing that the statistics are saying that people do consume wine. With Soweto Gold coming into the fray, it then says there is an appetite for Black ownership within the beverage space, right? Where are we going to take it? I think you're looking at Soweto Gold at the time, you're looking at probably the birth of Timo Touch wines. You're looking at the birth of B&G at the time. Or the creation of Sokumzi as a retail store. And you start realizing that we are willing to consume some of these products, and we are willing to be in spaces where Black people own something. So why not create wine? And wine was very simple for me, because it was it's the one product you can have at any corporate event. You can give it as a gift, but you've got a market of people that, especially the Black middle class, that was starting to assimilate to premium wines.
Yes.
And I had access to that. And I could sit back and say, what is it that I need to learn to make wine? But I already know that I've got a market that is already going to consume. So then I did the courses, learned how to make the product, designed the product. I think our first iteration of the product wasn't as great, but sentiment was, let's get to market. And when I remember vividly, when we were doing our marketing sales, we sold the first batch for about 100 Rand. We're trying to sell for 100 Rand. And then we got such a high demand that we had to then change the price up to 350. And it sold out.
Yeah, because the more demand it is, then you can increase the price. Yeah.
So we realized these people still want to buy the product. But I had worked in a company that paid me enough for me to make a batch. And when I made the first batch, I was like, I need to create sustainability for the business. So now you've got your first batch sold out within weeks.
Okay.
And then you're like, okay, I've got a business. And then we continuously improved the product. And through that, one of my mentors actually was founded Loction Culture. And then he literally said to me, knock on doors, people want your product.
I want to tap on something that you said now, or just highlighted. I think from what you've said so far is that there was a lot of research in what you're doing, and you also threw yourself or put yourself into the process of making wine. You didn't just go say, I just want to put my brand on this thing. You went and understood the process. How important would you say that is for people stepping into a business, especially one where there's a physical product? And I mean, winemaking is a whole, I don't know if it's an art, it's a whole process. Yeah, it's an art, so I think that's quite important actually.
I think my belief is, to start any business, you need to understand how the business functions from the entire value chain. Otherwise, what you're fundamentally doing is outsourcing that entire process, and you become dependent on whoever then creates the process, right? So, like I said, my initial proposition was ownership. So to then have a concept of ownership means, what am I really owning, right? One, I can tell you I didn't own the land, because to buy a wine farm is about 100 million. I was 21 at the time. So 21-year-old, just finished varsity. I don't have 100 million rand. No, an uncle that is gonna say, here you go, just go farm grapes.
That's a 1 million. Yeah. What is it? 100 million? Yeah.
Right? And I know because there's a farm that I'm eyeing eventually, right? So you then sit back and say, what is the value chain of this industry that I want to be a part of, and what portion of that do I want to own? So we then pick the winery portion of it, which is we'll have relationships with farmers. So our dependency now is on somebody growing the grapes. We now need to invest money in machinery that is going to allow us to then make this thing into a product that we own.
Yes.
When you just slap in your name on the product, you depend on me, and I can wake up tomorrow, which is what a lot of at the time, a lot of the black wine makers or black brand owners had a challenge with, was you had to go to a wine farm or winery and then pay 2 million rands to then get access to 60,000 bottles.
And I would add on to that and say that you also control the quality.
You control the quality.
Yeah, because I think one of the business lessons that I learned, so my first business was a clothing line.
Yeah.
And I made clothes like this, actually. It's funny enough. It was many years ago. And I remember I had a seamstress or a designer who would make the clothes. I would just find designs and choose the material and all of that and say, this is the feel I'm going for. And I remember one of the most frustrating things is one moment a person would make an item and it would come out perfect.
Yes.
The next the person would make an item and then it would come out flawed. And I'm like, you're the same person. How are you making this? And I realized I don't have control over that, which means I couldn't have control over customer satisfaction. So I think that speaks into the process as well. Owning the process means that you quality control. But I think also when it comes to your profits as well, it also impacts that. So I love that you highlighted that.
Yes, but also more importantly, I think for me, is sustainability. If you go out of business, I don't go out of business.
Yes.
If you decide to pivot,
if you're sick,
you know,
if something happens to you,
the delivery, because I think, like as I was saying, in the industry, there's been a lot of people coming out with brands, and some of them haven't maintained sustainability purely because at some point there was a business relationship that went off, and that then meant, because we are no longer seeing eye to eye, I don't have a product. Right? And the reason I don't have a product is because my reliance or my dependency is now you delivering. Right? So the process of understanding how you run or structure that whole conversation for me was, I need to be able to say, I can deliver, because then the brand that I was bringing was to say premium. Right? If you're selling a bottle of wine for 350, 21-year-old black young man, you're already competing with some of the biggest brands. Right? Who have heritage behind them. So when you come in with that price point, the price point implies consistency. Consistency for me then meant I need to be able to control the full value chain. I need to be able to control how it tastes, how it comes out, when it comes out, and not rely on somebody else who can then realize, actually, you're becoming too successful more than I am, so I don't want that relationship to happen, right? And that's fundamentally that's what I believe in. One, putting the time into understanding the business you are in, putting time into understanding the process of the business, how to be a part of that business, so that at any given point in time, you control it and you are not dependent. And by virtue of that, you can understand how the money flows versus you then having to sit back and say, let me put money into the business, somebody runs it, and I just get whatever is out of it, and that's my 2 cents.
And I think a lot of business owners, even specifically in the winemaking or even champagne space, they've encountered that challenge of, like what you said, they don't own the process or they don't even know the process.
Yeah.
And later on, it impacts their ability, their sustainability, just like what you said. I want to pivot back to, you were speaking about COVID, right, earlier on, and you had said that, okay, you moved through the suites and then now you did Moeng Wines. Now you're integrating the restaurant, so that you can, I think, increase your profits, tap into a different family market as well, and you can continue from that story because I did step into something else at the time.
Not a problem. So COVID happens, and I think all of us thought 28 days, right? So
little did we know.
Yeah. So COVID happens, first 28 days, you're like, we'll open, we'll go big. And it takes a lot longer than we anticipated. And the sentiment from that element then becomes a lot of businesses go out of business. And you're sitting there and you're realizing what would be required or needed to sustain businesses going forward, which is capital, right? Or what industry is still fundamentally functioning in that industry, in that space, which is investment.
Yes.
So COVID obliterates a lot of businesses. And main pain point is if we had capital, we would be around. And that then creates a sentiment of there's actually a gap, right? There is a lot of enterprises, entrepreneurs that run fairly well sustainable businesses. They just need access to capital. And then you realize there's actually a funding gap, which is about 350 billion or so, right? And this is not a conversation of there is no money. It's a conversation of the money is not structured in such a way that it can tap into SMEs. And the biggest people that are disadvantaged fundamentally are Black entrepreneurs. Some of the critical or key takeaways is throughout COVID, there were reliefs that were set up to try help SMEs. Right?
Yes.
Some of them were through banks, some of them were through departments. However, when you look at the disbursement, it tells a different story. And and through that, I then realized there's a need to put an enterprise around investments that looks into how to put money behind Black entrepreneurs. But more importantly, I had successfully built 2 enterprises, and through all of those, I bootstrapped it. And the conversation for me then became, I could have been further
if you had the funding, the capital.
You know, because the wine business, you realize you can't get access to funding because you're creating what is called a sin product. So there isn't any funding geared towards how do you put money behind wining. Then later you realize actually what I'm doing is agro-processing. So you can get access to funding through agriculture, you know, but that's through learning. And then you realize, but that process then requires you to have so much level of collateral. Then to tap into that funding then becomes a challenge. And
especially if you're coming from a disadvantaged background. Like you said, you didn't have the 100 million to buy a farm at the time. So other people that come from similar backgrounds as you, that look like you, they're also not going to have, most likely not going to have that. I didn't have that. I don't have the 100 million either, you know. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So then the question then became, let's set up a company that one speaks to young people getting access to funding. So let's understand the pain points. Let's understand how the business are run. What is it that they are trying to achieve? And what are they really fundamentally looking for? And we built this business on the back banner of understanding the fundamental problem of how do we create access to financing for SMEs. And a few years later, I think we have 2 Cent Solutions, which specializes in private credit and private equity and transactional advisory. We've got about 5 offerings from our private credit offering, which is our Township retail finance scheme, which finances retail businesses or sponsor shops within the Township sector. We've got our automotive credit fund, which looks into funding or giving access to capital for mechanics. We've got our working capital financing scheme, which then looks at a broader spectrum of enterprises that need short-term credit to fulfill or get growth opportunities. And then we have our green economy and agri-food funding, which then looks at the agriculture space, but also looks at green economy. So access to alternative energy, so solar installations. We're looking at farmers, primary farmers. We're looking at agro-processors, right? People that are able to buy grapes and then turn them into jam.
A product, yeah.
And then the final one is our multimedia youth fund, which speaks to how do you then put money or investments into creative industry, right? We've got a lot of film makers. We've got a lot of movie writers, but a lot of them have issues around how do I build a business out of this situation, and then how do we put money behind it, right? And then the business developmental leg of the business fundamentally then says, how do we prepare you for you to get access to the capital, so that you can then flourish. So when you look at our township retail scheme, is we've got over 15,000 enterprises under our purview. We've got a 70% approval rate.
And just for the audience, who's we?
We being 2 Cent Solutions.
2 Cent Solutions. So that's the name of
That's the name of the company.
The company.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So
Just so
2
that
Cent
we're
Solutions.
all on the same page here, because we're hearing all these beautiful things that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But we don't know which organization to refer to. So when you say preparation, right? You prepare the entrepreneurs for funding or to grow their businesses. What preparation would you say most enterprises need, or most business owners need, in order to get to that level where they can be trusted with more funds and for the growth of their business?
I think let me make a point, which is the one thing about entrepreneurs: the moment you've got a business, they've got access to market.
Okay.
Which is beautiful, right? So my sentiment has always been, the moment you are able to sell one product to a customer and get paid for it, you've got a business. And what fundamentally businesses struggle with in that conversation is then, how do I move from 1 to 10? Which becomes fairly easy because you buy one, you make a margin, and then you keep selling. But the conversation is, you are not documenting, right? And that becomes the fundamental challenge that a lot of businesses face for them to get access to funding. So the preparation conversation is, you look at a spaza shop. How do you get a spaza shop that has been there for the past 10 years access to funding? Is not a sentiment of they can't get access to funding. It's a sentiment of, what documentation do they need to meet my requirements for me to make an assessed or informed decision to give them capital.
So it's not about a 60-second pitch.
It's not about pitch.
It's not about a 60-second pitch. It's about what is it about? The numbers.
It's about the numbers, but it's about the business. Because the reality of it is, when you look at a mechanic, the person knows how to fix a car. The conversation then becomes, do they have a business that I can invest in, right? The chances is no. Why? Because a mechanic primarily might have worked at a OEM or at a service company, so they know the fundamentals. They know where to buy the product, and they know what the fundamental diagnoses are, so they can fix your car. So you've got an issue to maintain your car, you go to them, then they say, okay, cool, we need to change oils, However, they get 7 cars or 10 cars a day. They don't then record, this is how much I bought the stock for, this is how much I charge my services for, and then you can't track that conversation.
Income, expenses,
essentially, right? So basic accounting,
Yeah.
right? So to then make an investment decision on our side, then it's a sentiment of, what are we putting money into for us to know that we'll make money out
of it? Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's all it is. Everything else becomes a sentiment of risk appetite.
I love how you've simplified it, because I think when it comes to money and funding, people get intimidated, especially when they hear sales forecasting, right? They're like, yo, I don't know. I was doing some business coaching some weeks ago, and I remember I would say to the client, go and like prepare your sales forecasting. They're like, I don't know how to do it. I think I used AI. And I'm like, you know what? Use the tools that you have, because you just need to make sure you get the numbers in. You can see how much you make in a number of months, how much you make then in a number of years, and how much, what will the ROI be for anybody who wants to invest in your business, right? Because they need to see the numbers. And I think people get very intimidated the moment you mention numbers. And I love how it's just about how much we want to see the numbers, so that we can see how much we're going to get out of it. What are you having right now? What are you making right now? So that we can see how much we're going to make if we invest in you. Yeah.
And listen, sales forecasting is very simple, right? Because all it says is, if I've got 8 hours in a day that I operate, right? How many cars can I fix alone? If I then need to hire 4 more people, how many cars can they fix? Therefore, with 4 people, if I can do 1 car every 2 hours, then in 8 hours I can do so many cars, right? That's a forecast. I'm going to charge you for basic maintenance 6,000 rands, right? You pay me in the morning when you come and deposit, and then in the evening when you collect your car, the final balance. So I should have made so much every single day. And that's the fundamentals of it, right?
Yeah.
How much does it cost me to buy a service kit? It cost me 2,000 rands. How much do I pay this person at the end of the month? It cost me 15,000 rands. So with everything said, how much am I left with? So if Prince was to then give me 100,000, how much money am I left at the end of each month
To pay Prince back.
That there is a return on his investment? That's all it is, right? But the investable conversation becomes, do you have that document that can prove, one, you've done it before?
So what I'm getting from this right now is that every single entrepreneur who might want to grow or scale their business and might want people to invest in their business specifically needs to make sure they jot down the numbers. And I think entrepreneurs and admin, it's like oil and water. I think it's a habit that you have to build. Because, for example, in my business, what I do, every Monday I put aside time to do my admin. Because I know sometimes we are on the ground so much, we don't focus on the documentation part of it, making sure you do your admin, whether it's following up on emails, but also even when it comes to that financial part. But I also love that there's a lot of systems that make things easier, like what invoicing systems that you can document everything for you. But there's also just the education part of it, especially with the market that you're dealing with it. How much does that play a factor, I think, the education before you invest?
So the one thing we do in our business is we believe the entrepreneur knows more than we do, right? We know our business, we know investments. We believe the entrepreneur on the other side understands way more about that space and how it operates. I'll give you an example where we now have transactions in the petroleum space. There's a war right now happening. I don't understand the nitty-gritties of how long it takes a ship to leave Iran or whatever, or how do you buy fuel from Mozambique or Nigeria. They understand the intricacies, right? The education part becomes, because you know your business, how do I help you understand how I invest in your business, right? So the education element becomes, I would need this information, which you already have. Right? Because part of investments is, what have you done in the past that gives me an indication that if everything remains the same, you could do this in the future, which is an assumption, right? And for me to know what happened in the past, I'm looking at your bank statements, I'm looking at your financials, I'm looking at your sales figures, right? I'm looking at costing and all of those things. Then I then need to then input my analytical tools to then analyze, if this is how you've been performing, with an additional layer of this level of capital and this potential future revenue, we could make out so much. And the education part is not, on at least on our side, is not to then make investment such a huge...
Simplifying it.
Yeah. It's to simplify.
You already have the documentation. You just need to provide it to us. And perhaps here's the structure you can follow to do. This is how we need it. Yes. We need it presented to us.
We need it presented this way. Or more importantly, here are tools already on our platform that allow you to then say, I'm gonna afford an accountant, right? Because I'm still growing. Here's you taking your own information, putting into this particular tool that allows you to then be able to have something. We will then need to then run that verification process on our side, because we are then saying, how do we make sure you get access to funding? That's our principle. And through that, we then sit back and then say, we will then say, do you have, because we need it to make an informed decision. And when we have that information, we can then say, based on that data we have, you're not funding ready, or you are not eligible for the amount you need. However, we can start you here and then grow the relationship forward, right? We then can say to you, based on our assessments, we've noted a default here. You now start learning about how do you then maintain credit relationships around multiple parties. So we then say, because of this default, it creates a risk that you might not pay us back. And by virtue of that, this is how we price it in. If we price it in, we can't engage, so go back and pay Akamens, go back and pay Edgas, because as the director, we also look at you. So then the education conversation then comes into that aspect, because now we then say, we are investing in you as a business, which is a separate legal entity, but the people in the business inform the financial management of the business. And the education part of it then becomes, you need to learn how to separate yourselves.
And I want to add to what you're saying now, because one of the things that I always say is that your business will always be as good as you are as a leader.
Yes.
So if you're bad with time management, if you're bad with managing finances, your business is going to suffer in those areas. So in order for your business to get better, you need to get better. And you need to get better at, like you said, separating the personal account with the business account. I don't know how many entrepreneurs I've worked with who also use the same account for everything, and then you have to have that conversation about separating it so you can see how much you're making, at the end of the month. And if you can see how much you're making, then you can also plan forward in terms of your business. So I really love that. I want to know, what are the lessons you've learned as a leader through pivoting from the businesses that you've moved through, right? You've moved from Moeng Winery, right, to then now being in the investment and finance space.
So from winemaking to investment, you're looking at two sides of a coin, right? I've been an entrepreneur seeking funding, and I've now the investor providing funding to entrepreneurs. Biggest lesson is, you're not always going to be great at everything, and be happy with that, So the one thing that you can take out is understand, what am I doing in my business? Then look at people that see the same vision as you, and then say, you do this better than me, and empower them, right? It's a beautiful thing to say, I can do everything in my business, which is great, because you need to understand how your entire business operates. But understanding how your entire business operates then also requires a certain level of maturity to then understand that I'm not going to do that. I need somebody who will focus on doing that better than I would, so that I can then focus on growing
in your strengths.
Yes. Right? Biggest thing is from winemaking is get your clients. A lot of us focus too much on having the perfect product out. Take it to market. Let the market tell you if it makes sense or not. Right? Which is I'm saying, and I know a lot of our clients in the wine business still have some of our first bottle. And that was our MVP. We literally went in and said, we think the liquid is good. And then we sold it at 350 Rand a bottle. And then we improved on the liquid. So by the time we were now selling at the orbits, by the time we were selling through hotels, we had such a great learning curve that the product was so much more superior. But we went out to the market, and the market was like, I will still pay for the product. And then a lot of people have seen us through the growth, right? So biggest lesson for me is, you are never gonna get it right in your head. So you wanna then take the product out there and put it there. And as an investment person, it then says to me, if you're already selling something and people are interacting with you, there's a market. And more importantly, you know how to sell. Because at the end of the day, all we care about is, can you make sales, yes or no? A lot of entrepreneurs sit with a great idea that doesn't have a market. And they then say, I want to get access to funding. And I look at you and say, but you're not even selling to your sisters.
It's just an idea. It's a concept.
It's a beautiful concept.
You haven't
in your head.
proven that this concept will work in any essence.
And that then says, how do I substantiate your assertions or assumptions of I can make? I can't trust you with R1 million when you haven't sold 10 Rand, right?
So it's not a thing of sitting and watching Shark Tank and thinking, I'm going to have this concept and I'm going to go and pitch it somewhere. People need proof of concept you can see. And another thing that you highlighted about your market, get your product out there, stop thinking about the business in your head and get it out there and see if there's actually a demand for it. And that will be that will tell you if your business will work, essentially. Something that Richard Branson usually says is that your customers give you your greatest feedback about your product. Right? That's the thing that I wanted to touch on, that I think people are always in their heads about it. And if you want your business to grow, actually, always pay attention to what your customers are saying. It's like with you, I love that through the feedback of your customers, you listened and then you raised your wine prices because they were like, oh, this is premium stuff. This can compete up with the big guys. And then you listen to the customers. This can go into this space. We'd like to purchase it at a restaurant. Are you in restaurants? And then you keep listening to that. So those two things about getting to the market, and then you're going to find out if your business will work or it won't. And if it won't, then you try something you try something else. If it works, then you can scale up and build something there. What is the key thing that you have observed or have taken insight in when working with spaza shops and township businesses that you think it's something that perhaps something that could create a learning for other business owners in the same space?
I believe, or what I've learned rather from engaging with a lot of our SMEs on the ground, is they know what the customer needs. And their focus is, how do I give what my customer needs conveniently so, right? We do road shows for spaza shops, right, as we onboard some of these guys. And through some of these road shows, a simple understanding of POS systems, right? They will tell you why they don't use a certain POS, because it doesn't have certain products in it, or it doesn't allow them to do certain things. And they will say to you, my consumer wants to be able to buy electricity from me. My consumer wants to be able to buy cold drinks, or they want to be able to buy Powerball. So they are so in tune with what the customer needs, what product they need. Like you'll be shocked by region that spaza shop owners would say to you that in a certain region, people buy a certain kind of maize meal because the consumers prefer it because it's either fluffy, or in a certain region they prefer another maize meal because that maize meal is more durable, whatever the case may be. So that in-tuneness then says to you, the only way for you to build a product, which is what we take into it as well, because remember, we didn't wake up one day and say we just want to give people financing, there's money around. We had to sit back and say, if we were going to give spaza shops money, why spaza shops? What do they need, and how does it need to look like? Right? So we need to then understand that critical pain point,
their pain points,
and then offer that to them as a solution, versus sit back and say, do you need money? Yes, here's money, but you can't afford. So we then designed the products centered around the businesses that we are fundamentally trying to invest in, so that we are able to then understand the fundamental risks, the business cycles. So we then know, spaza shops operate in 4 cycles, right? They'll make more sales over the weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday are biggest uptakes. But during paydays, then products like teas move a lot more. You know that this tea moves a lot more in Soweto versus this tea that moves a lot more in Tembisa, right? But that's a simple notion of know your customer, right? And know your customer so much so that when you give them the product, they are not complaining about it. They are then saying, I'm happy to buy this maize because it's what I need. I'm happy to buy this maize in this pack. So you then know, why am I trying to sell 10 kgs when people want to buy 1 kg?
Exactly.
And then I'm selling a 1 kg, and then I've got tomatoes. So I'm not now selling you 2 kg tomatoes, I'm selling you 3 tomatoes, right? So I'll buy in bulk or whatever, but I'll pack it in such a way that people consume it, because I know my consumers are small families. So after work, they come in and buy something that they know they're going to make that evening. They'll coming back tomorrow. So it's the critical understanding of who your customer is, and sometimes it's really something to spend time with them. Which is why I'm saying it's beautiful to know that people want something. It's another thing to actually sit in their shoes and be like, oh no, I get why you need it. And then designing that for them, not because you think it's going to make you money. Designing for them. And once you design that product, everything else is peachy.
On that note, I think everything you've said is very insightful, and it really just speaks into that, the know your pain points. You've said that multiple times. In fact, I was thinking about that, and I think for anybody that's listening and they don't know what know your customer's pain point means, it means asking the questions to say, what's the problem I'm solving for my customer? Right? What is the issue that they struggle with that I will be solving for them, and how will I be solving it to them? And really just making sure you customize your product for your customer, because that's the person you're trying to sell to. Sometimes we create products because we're thinking about ourselves and not necessarily the broader market. And I think knowing the customer pain points is one of the the things that will help you as a business to actually serve the market and be sustainable, right? Because you're giving the people what they need. Give the people what they need. Exactly that. I want to move to another segment of this podcast. With everything that you've said, it's basically a card game that we are going to play. And you're going to be the first person to do it. So you're my guinea pig.
Lovely.
Yeah. So it is called Lead Yourself First Conversation Cards. And essentially, you are just going to pick a card and I will read out the question, right? So you just pick any card within the middle or at the bottom. So let me do that.
Right.
All right. I'll read it. All right. And this card says, have you ever experienced burnout and how did you recover from it?
I have. I think the best way to recover from burnout is resting.
Okay.
And my wife says this to me a lot, which is rest where you don't think about work. So what I've done in my life is created a routine. And what that routine does for me is being an entrepreneur is the pressures of I need to always be on. Right? When I was a single man at the time, I could wake up at 4 a.m, work all the way up until 11 p.m. or 1 a.m, and keep rotating.
Which is one of the myths about entrepreneurship. You're going to own all your time. Yeah. You work less hours.
There's nothing like that. Yeah. Right? But I got into a space of sitting back and saying, how do I build this thing sustainably in such a way that my body's still good? So I've got a routine that says I wake up in the morning, I work out, and then my work hours are from this hour to this hour. Of course, there's nuances of you need to meet clients, so it might slightly go over, but that's what I do. The one thing that I then further added on was to say, get an office. If you can, get an office or get a place where you work. If you've got an office at home, it becomes from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening. That's work. When you're done with work, go home.
Knock off.
Do something that is you. It's not the business. It's who you are, right? So I play golf, or I hang out with my friends, and we speak everything else but what we do on a day-to-day basis, and that builds you as a human being, right? Because you're not always going to wake up and say, "Hey, do you want money? Do you want money?"
Yes.
You have to actually fundamentally be like, "But who am I outside of the business?"
Yes.
And I think that's a critical lesson that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have, because you burn out because you're trying to build a business, which is great, but you don't know who you are, so you don't even know what you do outside of working. So then how I then did is to then say, I work Monday to Friday. Weekends, entertainment. I'm out with my wife, we go to church, I'm playing golf. I don't do work over the weekend at all.
And it means it speaks into having those boundaries with yourself and boundaries with others, because the routine thing is a boundary thing. You can't have routines if you don't have boundaries, because you need to say no to yourself and others.
Essentially. So the beauty of it is the routine then says to you, what exactly am I doing? And I need to do it in a structured manner.
Yes.
Otherwise, you find yourself doing everything. And through that, you then have nothing. So then you sit back and say, if my routine is Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, what am I doing Monday? What am I doing Tuesday? How do I have investor meetings and then speak to clients and then come and have podcasts with you? How do I structure that week of mine? So we'll then sit back and say, Monday, this is what we're trying to do for the week, then structure it out over the week. Did I achieve what I wanted to do from Monday to Friday? I didn't. Why didn't I do it? Oh, because actually took too long at a lunch. Oh, shucks. How do I then start structuring that so that I can achieve more? And that's how you build sustainable businesses.
Yes.
But more importantly, you don't find yourself allocating so much time that you are tired, one, because you're not getting everything done. And because you're not getting everything done, your body's tired. So then you then need to then say, how do I fit in rest in that whole conversation? Because my belief is to build a business, sometimes you have to just really look at what is corporate doing so that I can do it. You know, don't say I'm going to have so much money and at that time then I'll have structure. You need to build in the structure and say, let me take leave. you know. I didn't hate my sales target, but let me actually take leave. Let me go away for a week, and I'll come back after a week and actually work. And I think one of my mentors taught me something critical, which was, if you don't get it right, just go have an ice cream. You know, spend the day, just go have ice cream. Don't think about it. Come back tomorrow refined, because the burnout would reflect in the business, and the business will then suffer through that as well.
Especially if you're in the building phase, because a lot of entrepreneurs, it runs around you. So if you burn out, then there's no one to actually do a lot of things, and then that creates more stress, right?
The complaint is that the business is not growing.
Exactly.
But it's not growing. It's that you are tired. And by virtue of that, then you drain out the energy out of the business.
I think, thank you for sharing that. That was very valuable. Taking care of yourself. I think it's something that as business owners, we tend to forget, but it's exactly that: building routines, having a coffee break, having a lunch break. Even if you work for yourself, you can go and have a virtual meeting with another entrepreneur, you know, and say, hey, let's do lunch, you know, let's have our lunch virtually and all of that. And having a structure and systems in place, you know, the structure Monday to Friday is office hours, right? I do Mondays, I'm off. I only do admin on that. And then I do Tuesdays to Saturday because I work weekends and I'm a coach. So sometimes people are available on weekends. But because I take Mondays off, that kind of creates balance, right? And sometimes, for example, people own restaurants or certain businesses where they can't rest. And then restaurants. But yeah, it's things that we don't think about, but very valuable. I'm not going to do another card. I was going to do another one, but I think you've said enough for everyone to find value in the conversation. What's a key thing that you'd want to say to an entrepreneur who is scaling their business up right now and is looking to grow?
Focus on the basics. I meet investors on a daily or regular basis, and we know a lot because we've got access to information. Simplify it. You know, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to take this product, give it to this person. Simple. That's your business. The jargon is media and entertainment, and it's fun. But to scale your business, focus on the basics. What is it that you're fundamentally trying to do? Focus on that, and spend time doing that. Because the reality of you building your business is a system of repetition versus a system of output, right? So to scale, ideally, at least how I understand it is, you need to have done something over and over and over and over again, getting some form of output out of it, and then those accumulated, you then get a bigger result, versus assuming that because I can do X to Z, I should then get X output. And that then speaks to the difference between businesses that are traditional or built over time or sustainable over years that you can leave to your kids, versus businesses that fundamentally are, let me feed myself, right? So focus on the basics, and through doing that over time, putting in your 10,000 hours, you will see the cumulative results or compounded results of your routine.
Focus on the business, focus on the main priority, because it can be distracting, right? We get so distracted. We are on podcasts. We're doing many things as business owners. So focusing on what it is that you set out to do, focusing on your customers, focusing on the pain points. Those are the key things that I think you said today, and really studying your market, knowing your process. I think we are leaving with so many key takeaways from this conversation. I thank you so much for taking my call to you, to say, inviting you to this podcast. I think this was so valuable, and I can't wait to see what you do next, because every time I speak to you, every time I see Prince, there's something else that he's up to, and it's always bigger and it's always better. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing your journey with us and your insights.
Thank you very much for having me, and definitely we'll come back when there's bigger stuff to announce.
Yes, you heard it right here on the Lead Yourself First podcast with me, Yvette Ratshikhopha. Thank you so much for joining us, and check out the next episode when it is.